Future State, the next Batman issue 2. I'll start off our Future State books for the week. Obviously, we liked issue 1 quite a bit. At least the main story. Obviously, backups are a bit more hit and miss. But once
Is
again,
there a way for us just to get the main story and not have to deal with the backups?
That would be lovely, wouldn't it?
Well, I think next issue, now that you've sampled all the backups that we're going to get, because it's all just part 2s now of the backups we've already had. I think next time, if you want to just not read the backups, you can. You have that choice.
I mean,
yeah,
but
you're
right
still
now,
spending $8 for what, 25 pages?
Yeah, Matt, we knew this as soon as we started talking about DC putting backups into their books. We knew this was going to be a possibility with some of them.
I get where Matt's coming from. It feels a little bit more significant on these books, like this one in particular, and I think the Superman one this week, which are so big and such a price compared to, well, you know, it's an extra. Like most of the backups that are going forward are like, oh, it's an extra $1 for 10 pages of backup, whereas this is like quite significantly more than that.
And it's not like, to me, and I'm glad you brought up Superman 2. The main story versus the backups, the gap is huge, and I really wanted to like the backups in this one, and I just, we'll get to it. But
so far in this particular book, the Outsiders backup was fantastic. Everything else, yeah.
Well, we'll get into it. Because I mean, I had a lot of pages to read this week, and certainly 2 of these books being 60 plus pages, was not super helpful in that. But I mean, the main story here, I did like again. Now the art is good. It's not as good as the first issue because it's not the same art. It's not Darrington again.
It's Darrington's still doing the breakdowns, but Laura Braga's doing the finishes.
Who's still good, but not as good.
At
least,
it's more blocky.
Taste depending.
It's more reminiscent of Dexter Soy and the thick lines and the kind of blockiness that I don't know. Like Darrington had a flow to it, and I know he's still doing the breakdowns, but I don't know. Like this art felt more like stiff. And not that that makes it bad. It's just, it's different.
Honestly, one of the biggest differences as well, I feel, is we've got a different colorist. Because we had Tamara Bonvillain on the first issue. It's Arif Prianto on this one, and I feel the difference. You know, it's not as deep with the colors. I think, you know, is a way to describe the first issue of this.
I feel bad for saying anything negative about it, honestly, because if we didn't have the art in the first issue, there'd be very little to complain about. This would not be something we look at and say, oh, this is subpar art or anything like that. But because
it's not subpar art, it's not like, when I opened it up and it wasn't Darrington, I was like, oh.
Yeah, because we had the first issue, because we had the different art, and then we come to this instead, instantly it has to be compared because it's issue 2 of a thing.
And I still think there are some very, very good art in this story. But it's not as good. And I think it's a little bit disappointing that it's a 4-issue mini that we've known about for a while, that, you know, we couldn't get the same artist on just all 4 stories, just, you know, get ahead on it.
This is my vibe on Future State thus far, is it definitely felt like, not that it was like necessarily thrown together, but there is a, hey, kind of try what you want, right?
I think the fact that they didn't have enough lead time to have the same artist for, you know, 4 issues worth over 2 months tells me that maybe this was thrown together a little bit more last minute than we maybe thought before.
I don't know if I agree with that, because it's kind of what I was going to say when you were complaining about there not being the same artist in all 4 issues, which I agree I would rather have, but I feel like I hear you make that complaint a lot, and it's not that it's an invalid complaint, it's more that it's just the way comics are now, and clearly they have no interest in changing it. So
but here's the thing, I disagree with that.
Hold on, let me finish my point here. I don't necessarily think it indicates the Future State was something good. It may have been, I'm not saying it wasn't, but I don't necessarily think it indicates anything, because I feel like comics in general have been that way for a long time now.
No, this is where I disagree. I think DC Comics have been that way for the last few years.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm talking about DC because that's what we always talk about.
Right, but it's the double shipping that's mostly been the cause of this. Beyond that, they've mostly stuck to artists for full arcs, give or take. And that's what I mean when you especially with this is a mini series where they have that awareness of this is all it is, this is something they're going to want to sell in bookstores in the future. I feel like it would be really easy to give them the lead time and have this be more consistent, especially as it's not like Nick Darrington's not on this issue at all. He's still doing the breakdowns. So he was clearly still involved. It's not like they divvied this up straight away. This was, okay, it's not going to be finished. We'll hand it over.
Yeah. That's just my thing too. And I don't want to say that. I mean, I feel a lot of the backups are half baked, but again, the main stories, like I feel like this is a story that Ridley's been wanting to tell for a while, just because kind of what we had heard with Generations, those rumblings early back, you know. So again, I feel like the main stories are fine, and then like give or take different art, like that's not going to change how I feel about the story at the end of the day, right? But just some of them putting together the backups, the ones that they choose, and the creative teams on those backups, and then alternating those backups.
I think a lot of the backups... It feels
like they're just trying stuff to see if it works, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I don't think that's actually a bad thing, to be honest. The backups, to me, it feels less like they're half-baked and more like they want to try a lot of new names. Not that every name on these backups are new, but a lot of them are. A lot of them are fresh names in DC that I don't recognize. And I feel like, there's probably a sort of like, let's try some different things, let different writers and artists try different stories. And some of them work better than others. Some of them feel a bit extraneous. The problem is, though, is if you don't put them on a Batman book like this as backups, then how many people are going to read them? Is kind of the long-standing problem that we have.
And that's what I'm saying. They're just throwing stuff up against the wall. And we'll get there.
There's probably some backups more than others that are inherently more sellable as titles. Like, the second one in this is the name of the story is Batgirls. That book probably sells just based on its own name. No matter what team you stick on it, you can stick, someone with no experience at DC Comics whatsoever. But you say, all right, we're putting out a Batgirls book for Future State. That probably sells as a 2-issue mini.
It maybe does. Batgirl wasn't really selling that well beforehand, though, so I'm not sure if that's as true as it once was. But again, that's just like an ongoing problem we've had across the board, particularly at DC, where you have to slap everything on a Batman book, or to a lesser extent some of the other big characters. But that's I don't know. I feel like doing a bunch of backups and seeing, throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, though. Like, I don't know what the alternative to that is. Like, do you want them to try things internally and just not let things see the light of day if they don't work?
That's kind of what the editorial process is for, right?
I just don't want to spend $8 on something that I don't like and I feel it was a waste of my time. That's all.
Well, that's a more a critique of just the anthology decision.
No, I know, but a lot of this Future State stuff, I feel like, especially after, and it's just because this issue of Batman, and then when we get to Superman, it feels so backloaded that I'd rather have just had the main story, and then if they want to do an anthology, but like you said, that's not going to sell. So how are they going to do it? And I understand that, but I guess it just comes down to disappointment, because I want all the backups to be like the Outsiders level, where like, hey, this is something fun and people can latch onto these characters, versus the ones that I read this week that I'm just kind of like, okay, well, I could have been reading something else in the time that I spent for this. Especially this week, I'm just a little cranky because I
get it. I think
I broke my own rule of going, I'm not going to read all of these. And then as I'm looking at them, I'm like, I guess I'm reading them all.
And now you're like, shouldn't have read all of them.
I shouldn't have, because then I ran out of time to read stuff that I kind of wanted to read and had to rush through, So, and that's just this week. I've learned my lesson, and I just wish, like, hey, maybe I didn't need to read all the Superman ones, I
think just in a broad strokes, looking at the week as a whole, not to spoil too much as we go forward, I think I enjoyed the Superman backups more than I do in this Batman book, for example. But again, I think the key difference that Matt was getting at is the level of quality between the main story and then the backups is still pretty significant.
Yeah, I'm going to try to put some positive spins and arguments into this, because I feel like if I let you two just go right now, this is just going to be a miserable negative discussion. So I'm trying to make sure there's a voice going against that for the people listening.
Yeah, and I get that. Let's talk about how great the next Batman was.
Well, because this is went really down a path rather than staying focused on the story at hand, which makes the one that's cut up for YouTube going to be really weird and not very focused at all. No, next Batman, the main story here, he's investigating a murder. Two culprits have murdered someone, and a lot of the issue, a lot of the main story here is action. It's him running from the magistrate police force. It's a lot of, and it's a really well drawn stuff. Again, the fact that the art's disappointing compared to the first issue does not take away from the fact that it's very pretty. And this one,
3 pages in particular that stand out, where the first page is all the horizontal panels. There's like 5 or 6, and then you have 6 vertical panels, and then you have a third page of when Batman's running away. I think that's the bit that leads into the moment from which Dark Knight was it? Dark Knight.
Rises?
That moment was it Rises?
You're thinking of when he's looking down the alleyway and it's is he there?
Yeah, that Rises. I'm forgetting which one it is, but I'm like, oh yeah, okay, we're doing that here now.
Yeah. And the coloring is, the colorist is different, so it has a different feel to it, but the color palette is definitely the same. They're trying to match what colors are being used.
It's the same colors, they're just not as dark, is the big takeaway I've seen because I flicked back and compared between them.
Yeah. But it's maybe the same world is the point I'm making, though.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and we get more of Lucius's wife with the mayor, the whole hunting down the masks.
The mayor with an eye patch, cool look.
Yes.
You know,
that's like, the guy I was talking about before in I think that's in that issue of Detective that I read last week for the Patreon book, and I mentioned how there was the guy running for mayor with the eye patch.
Right.
Yeah, this guy.
Yeah, I don't remember this at all, but sure, I'll take your word for it.
It was a whole thing in that issue last week. It's fine.
Yeah. But anyways, what I like about this too is like it feels like year one, you know, with this Batman, because he's making big mistakes, right? He kind of lets himself get cornered.
I mean, the fact that
the police force, which is different than the peacekeepers that we've seen, right?
Yeah, the fact that the next scene is him in a shipping container, like with his wound, it is very year one of him, like nursing. He's like, oh shit, I let the cops get to him. You know, that's a big moment in Batman year one.
Yeah, and he's like, I can't take them all by myself. I need to get away from here, and that's where he gets clipped. And he's talking about how his suit has enough compression to keep the blood flow, but he's going to need to get help. And he starts talking to who I'm assuming is like his Alfred, who almost has seeming like a Russian accent, just for some of the dialogue choices here, which is interesting. But yeah, I really like how flawed, and it's revealed who this Batman is. We finally see without the mask, which is anticlimactic for us, as tapped in as we are, but still a good moment.
I think it helps that it's not actually meant to be a big, huge moment. It's not like a big, shocking reveal. It's more of a downbeat kind of personal moment.
Yeah, this is when he's bleeding inside the shipping container, and he has the mask off. We don't even see him take it off. No. When we cut there, he has it off, and don't know, his face is in shadow for the first few panels where we see it, and we have a reveal with the lighting, so to speak.
Yeah, but it's very low key.
It isn't treated like a big. Yeah, it's not treated like a big. Oh, you didn't see this coming moment.
The low-key reveal. No. So yeah, we have like because the Gotham police force are basically working for the magistrate, and we basically
it says that they're like a private police force at this point. So like they've been Gotham PD has been privatized, which is like the worst case scenario.
And some of
they were already corrupt.
And some of the detectives are clearly against this and don't like where this is all leading. But they get a window where Batman's going because they really track his comms or whatever. Batman tracks down these two culprits, goes into a fight with them, and very quickly one of them yells stop and unmasks, and it turns out to be this married couple who killed who they killed because he murdered their daughter. So it adds this kind of like dark kind of like sense of justice, this empathy to what they've done. It's not just a clear cut case of two thugs murdered someone in cold blood, or whatever. There's something more to it. Right. And this Batman clearly differentiates himself from Bruce. Even sort of questions, or the way he narrates, he's like, "Yeah, I believe the guilty deserve to get what they get." Like his instinct isn't immediately to, "Oh, I'm taking you in for murder," and maybe that's what he'd ultimately decide to do. He doesn't get a chance to though, because of course the cliffhanger is very quickly approaching, which is the cop showing up, to take him on.
And that's what gets me too. Is like, under normal circumstances, if this police state wasn't taking over Gotham, maybe he would have. But the fact, like, to him, they're no better than, you know, what else was going on. That the justice in the hands of these people is better than the justice of the magistrate. That's the vibe I was getting anyways from it. So
yeah, it definitely sounds like we're in a very shades of grey Gotham right now, where there's not a lot of good, and this is at least there's a more of a sense of justice in what they've done for the daughter than anything that's going on with the system.
Right.
You know, so I mean, whether or not he has a harsh no killing rule like we think of as Batman, that's something I think we'll discover maybe. A bit more. It definitely seems like he doesn't. It seems like he's not a brutal killer though. It doesn't seem like he's going out of his way to kill anyone. But if he lets this slide, for example, as maybe an interesting character beat that'll differentiate him from, you know, Bruce.
Well, and we also get his mom talking about what the masks have done to her family, and about how the Fox tech is kind of what is propping up the magistrate, you know, and all this different technology, and they came to her because the law, as it's written constitutionally, wouldn't hold up. In that she's not against the law for what it stands for, but how it's being enacted. So that's her with the mayor, and they hint of what happened to her daughter that the masks are involved with. So that added another wrinkle. Like what happened to Tam so bad that it caused her mom to do this? Her dad to side with what seems like the magistrate, and then her brother to take up the mantle of Batman. You know, like.
Yeah, it definitely seems
like that.
A plot beat we're going to be getting to in this story. Sure. Or at the very least heavily teased so that the other series that's coming can tackle it.
Yeah.
I like this though. I think this hunting down. I mean, a lot of its action, and it looks very good. But I think this the idea of this just not being a couple of bad guys, as it were, and being something a little bit more. Out of like a sort of revenge movie kind of thing. Was certainly a bit more interesting. So
yeah.
Probably didn't like it as much as the first chapter, but I don't know how much of that is the art and how much of that is
It's still good. I still like the next Batman.
This main story is still really solid, and when we get to the individual ratings, it's still reasonably high. Just probably not as high as the first issue, mostly because of the art.
Yeah. Well, I think we're pretty much there, unless there's any other points people want to make about this story.
Just, I read Nightwing before I read this one, and I was very confused by this couple. I'm like, are they the same couple as in Nightwing?
Oh, right. No, I read this first, so never crossed my mind. Matt, what are you rating this first story then?
I'm going to give this a 7.5.
Connor?
I'll give it an 8.
Yeah, I was thinking straight 8 as well. So that's the first story. We will rate as a whole at the end, as we've been doing with these more anthology books, especially with these ones that have got, like, the backups are basically full-size stories. Because, like, the first issue, this is 3 20-page stories, except you're not getting part 2 of the backups from last issue, you're getting part 1s of another set, and then you're getting part 2s in issue 3 of the first set and issue 4 of this set. It makes sense in your head if you've wrapped your head around it, but...
No, it makes sense. Well, we'll get there.
Yeah. So yeah, this is the Batgirl story, which naturally was one of these stories that I was the most excited for, just based on it's Cass and it's Steph, and it's a Batgirl story. Really curious to see what this is going to end up being.
Yeah, I have a pretty major critique immediately in that I didn't know, this is the Batgirl story. I'd forgotten what was in the issue. I just kind of started reading it, and there's a character revealed pretty early on, like a couple of pages in, that if I hadn't read one of the other books last week, I would not have known who this was for pages. And that's kind of unforgivable.
Yeah. I think that's a fair point.
Here's my biggest critique with this one. It's way overwritten.
Oh, yeah. Far too many words, that's for sure.
When you're dealing with Cass, whose main character point is she doesn't speak a whole lot. Well, and when she does, you listen, right?
I'll make 2 points on that. One, I think it's fair to accept that years in the future she speaks more fluent, right? I think that's a fair point to make, is that she wouldn't still be speaking the same broken English she does now. 2, I will say that she doesn't actually have that much dialogue. I mean, don't get me wrong, the bubbles she does have are far more wordy than she normally does. It does stick out. But when she meets Steph, like, most of those bubbles for like 4 pages are just Steph monologuing for constant.
Yeah.
and it's like, did you guys get that it was Steph right away, or just because you knew it was Batgirls? Maybe
I knew it from her because of the one before.
Yeah, the Robin book last week.
Yeah, like, because of the eye patch, and you were like, oh, okay.
But there's no signifier to me, like, so Steph talks, right? But here, it's just like a Tarantino character that does not stop talking.
She doesn't feel like Steph. There's not a lot of Steph's character there.
Not at all. And it's just like, if you're gonna do a stylistic thing of she's talking this much, then and you're doing a Batgirls thing, I would have leaned into Cass not talking as much, right? And just let her keep talking and keep talking. And instead, you get this overwritten where I felt like Connor reading a Bendis book. I would turn the page and see all the bubbles and go, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I would get annoyed. And like, this is a story I feel like I should like, because I like all these characters. And why are all these heroes locked up in this prison? Like, why is Jimmy Olsen there? Why is Beast Boy there? Were they in Gotham when this all went down?
Yeah, well, let me sell some context here. So the main gist of the story is that Arkham here, there's Arkham, isn't it? Is it Arkham?
Sure.
It may actually not be Arkham, but
no, it just says the Magistrate's Detention Facility.
Yeah, so it's their place. So when Cass is interested at the start, you see that a lot of the detainees on one side are villains and the other side are actually heroes. So Beast Boy's there and some other characters. But the purpose of this story is that Cass is trying to get. She basically has started to believe the rumor that Batman is really alive, and she believes that he's trapped down below. And there's actually more on this in Catwoman later, which we'll talk about when we get to that book. But she wants to get below to the basement levels where she believes Batman is being kept. And it turns out, we actually see later on that Babs is also down there. Or, I mean, I say also, we don't know for sure that Bruce is there yet, but Babs definitely is. So
yeah.
And the vibe that I got cutting to the end is that she's the one that sent out the signal suggesting that Batman's alive, but not necessarily Batman, right?
I don't know. It's hard to say because we do know that Bruce is alive too. So
yeah,
I don't know. I just took it as because it looks like she's hooked into all these cables and stuff, and her being Oracle, I feel like that was her reaching out for help, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can buy that she's not necessarily knowing that Bruce is alive, and it's more she's trying to keep the spirit of the bat alive to give people hope or something like that. I can totally buy that.
That's what I took it as, and
But the big conceit of the issue, though, is that when Cass gets thrown in a cell with Steph, like, the way they talk about her, it's like she's turned bad, and she's now like the leader of all the criminal gangs in the prison. We find out later that she's actually just kind of a double agent, and it's all...
felt to me like an excuse to, this is why she was written out of character and terrible all this. She was like, it's fine, just write it all away because she's undercover. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't buy it. When I got to the reveal that this was all just undercover because she had to get close so they could eventually do whatever, I was kind of like, okay, so you haven't completely character assassinated her, I suppose. That's nice, but I still didn't really enjoy reading the first half of this issue because I was looking forward to Steph and Steph being Steph, and she just was. You got none of that.
Yeah, no, I got some hard-edged character who.
And Isaiah, unless you know that this is Steph, you would have no idea because. So she's introduced, and it's a big, like, hey, look, it's me, kind of, it goes, nothing to say to your old friend. It's like you're supposed to immediately know who this is. And then 2 pages after that, you have once a Batgirl, always a Batgirl, right? And you're like, that could maybe give it away, but it's not even, again, if you didn't think this was Steph, it's not 100% clear because it could be just on that Cass, right?
Right.
It's not until a full 6 or 7 pages after that reveal where Cass actually says spoiler, and then and then it cuts to her as like, to definitively kind of place it as that character, and that's insane. That's like a third of the issue.
The only thing I'll say against that, because I agree pretty much all with everything you just said, except for the fact that the title page is the page before that. So I think the title Batgirls would probably give it to you.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
but the way that it's written, though, I get what Connor's saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. Yeah, but
yeah,
because I mean, I have to admit, I didn't really remember what was coming either. I only remembered that this is a Batgirl story when it revealed Cass. I was like, oh, this is the Batgirl story. I didn't remember it was in this book.
I'd still forgotten that it was a Batgirl story, and I was just like, oh, it's a Cass story because I'd just completely forgotten.
So y'all didn't read the cover?
No, I never read the cover.
Never.
I look at the art and then open the book.
Yes.
Stupid me.
Yeah. I mean, so here's the sad part of this is I think conceptually, if you told me, okay, in this future state scenario, a bunch of heroes, but most notably including Steph and Cass, are in a prison. Barbara's in the sort of solitary, deep, lockdown state underneath, and it's all about them trying to get to her and prove that Batman's alive to regain hope. On paper, just what I just said sounds amazing to me. I love it. Right. I love it. But they actually had to write Steph as like a hard-edged prison character for some reason, and it just like sucked all the fun out of it.
And she's like the leader.
And when you haven't,
everyone's serving her.
Yeah. Well, also you have how do you say the artist name? Is it Aneki?
I think so.
Sounds right. Yeah.
The art's really good too, and the fact that there's so much dialogue that's just overall like Steph just talking over herself.
Yeah, I didn't
herself over.
I didn't hate it conceptually, to say. There's a couple of sequences that I think are quite fun. Particularly the sort of montage of Steph going around making sure that or actually, it's Cass going around trying to question all the villains, but because Steph's basically warned everyone not to pick a fight with her, it's kind of this little running gag for a montage where she pushes Killer Croc, for example, and then Croc's about to get angry and punch, and then he goes, "Oh, grr. Sorry, I must have lost my balance in your box." So like that was a vaguely amusing little sequence of like scenes. I thought.
Yeah, and that's where the art gets to shine because Steph's not on page talking, so
yes,
not all covered up.
So I was reading this morning and I was just like, oh man, this is a lot, And then I'll just say here too, was so crunched for time I didn't read the Sirens story. Which I'll go back to.
We'll get to that in a minute, but you didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, the most interested I got in the Steph stuff was when we actually got the flashback, and it was like her actually talking to Nightwing, and them actually trying to like have some sort of plan for the city. And I'm like, you know what? I'd much rather read like Nightwing leading all the Bat characters in the city than I would this weird prison version of Steph. But whatever.
Yeah.
Tis what it tis. So yeah, it reveals Babs is down below, hooked up to computers, and it just kind of ends with all the various prisoners who they've basically Steph and Cass have arranged for them to cause a distraction for Cass to go down and try to get to the basement level. So it ends with the big riot starting. So it's kind of really murky read. I don't think it's the worst thing ever, but it is definitely overwritten. The dialogue is far too bulky.
It's not the worst thing ever, but I also, had I not already read a whole bunch of stuff this week, I think I would have been okay. So again, mostly it's me being cranky because there's just so much.
I think,
but it's also not like I expect more also out of Vita Ayala because most of the stuff I've read from them I like.
Yeah.
And so when I saw who was attached to this when I got to the credit page, I was like, this does not feel like anything I've read from, and that's what I mean about them just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. You know what I mean? Like this. It's almost to me like it wasn't like Vita Ayala was like, hey, I have an idea for a Batgirl story in the future state stuff. It was kind of like, hey, do you think you could do the story?
This is your assignment. Turn it in 3 weeks, please.
I've never written Steph before, but I'll give it a shot.
Yeah,
and
maybe.
Then it just turns because
their Dead Man mini was really good when that came out.
Yeah.
So
I like and most of the anthology stories and like annuals or just the smaller stuff, like the backups I've read.
Some of the stuff in the metal tie-ins, right?
Yeah, like
I think,
and it's fine. It's not indicative of this, and so I just thought like this is just it feels off.
When we get to issue 4 of this of Next Batman, because obviously I'm getting it for Next Batman itself, I'll probably read part 2 of this just because I'm curious as to how the story actually ends up, even though it's not the greatest read. I'm not sure I'm going to say the same about the next one when we get to it, but
I will be particularly annoyed with issue 4 of this book because issue 1 I was very happy with. I very much loved 2/3 of it. This issue, I'm like, okay, I only really like one story. The other two, not so much. And I'm a bit annoyed that I had to spend, however much it was, the triple price, on this. And I'm like, right, okay, but I didn't know any better. It was a risk. Issue 3, I'm going to be happy to buy because I know I'm safe with 2/3 of it. Issue 4 is really frustrating because I have to spend the full price to finish off just that one main story. And I have to. I can't not.
Oh, that's it. I'm curious to see where this one goes. Like, again, it's not a total wash. A lot of it annoyed me in the way that the dialogue was presented. But the story that's being told, I don't hate.
Yeah, and I think part 2 might benefit as well because we've already done all the prison stuff with Steph. Part 2 may not have that as being a heavy feature.
And I was wondering where Babs was in all this because I had a low key worry, like she's working with the magistrate for whatever reason at this point. Because as I read through these, you're checking off back characters that could be allied there, and we'll get more on that with Nightwing. At least I think it was Nightwing. It's been a long week. And so Babs was one of the ones that was noticeably absent. So to see how she's involved in this it adds a layer that keeps me interested, at least.
I get it. I think for me, this was just too badly written that I've already written off the second part. I don't want to read it anymore. Even if the story presenting the ideas is solid, I don't have any desire to actually read it. I'll just hear from whichever of you guys ends up reading it. What happens with Babs, I guess.
Yeah. So there you go. That's the Batgirl story. I wish I was more positive, but it wasn't really. I mean, it had the Batgirl characters in it technically, but one was unconscious, one was like a super weird prison boss version, and there's not really any Batgirling to speak of. So,
have you guys ever watched Venture Brothers?
Nah, sorry.
No.
So there's an episode where the arch villain, their arch nemesis, ends up in prison, and the two boys get sent to prison too, and he's talking like he runs the place, but he doesn't. And those were the vibes. I was getting Monarch vibes from Cass, and it just it was just weird. So.
All right, Matt, what are you rating the Batgirl story?
I'm gonna give this one a 5.
Connor?
I'm gonna give it a 3. I think it would have been a 4 just for being so overwritten, but the not naming Steph for so long drops it a whole point.
I want to agree with Matt and go with the 5 and go right down the middle. Disappointing.
I really
for
like
sure.
art. I don't want to lose that.
Yeah,
art. Great.
Yeah, it's not the worst thing ever. I want to reiterate that. It's just really disappointing given what it could be and what it should be. So, that's the Batgirl story. So there's a Gotham City Sirens story, part 1 here at the end. Paula Sevenbergen writing with Rob Haynes on the breakdowns, and then Lupacino on the pencils. That's interesting. Lupacino, not
it. Yeah, this is. You can tell this isn't entirely Lupacino because it's easily the weakest work I've seen.
And that's why I was going to get back to it. But if I'm not missing, I mean, it's not like I won't own it because
I kind of stopped reading halfway through. I found myself just scrolling, page. I wasn't actually reading it anymore because I was just checked out.
Well, no need to call me a hero, everyone, but I did struggle on through and finish the whole thing. And
do you have anything insightful to say about it?
Well, kind of. My biggest takeaway from this story, which is basically Catwoman and Ivy, and Catwoman feels nothing like Catwoman in her own book, in the Future State book that we got this week. So that first and foremost. But essentially, they found a robot because they're trying to take down this Dilton, I guess Elon Musk-esque villain or whatever he is, and they've found this robot that he built, but she kind of wants to go against them, and we get a flashback to how they found her halfway through, but she's already kind of there at the start of the issue, or the start of the story. And honestly, the biggest takeaway, because they set up that this robot was kind of awake doing stuff for like a week before they found her, when they broke into this guy's place, and the biggest thing is that she binge watched a bunch of TV shows, so there's a lot of awkward TV references sprinkled throughout this issue. There's a reference to shows that I like, there's a reference to shows that I've not watched, but even the ones that I liked, it just kind of felt weird. Like, oh, this is like a character on The Shield. And it's a great show, but from a writing perspective, this feels really clunky.
It's like when they're all sat there drinking the cocktails, and one of them's like, this is just like Sex and the City. I'm like,
and that comes back because when you get the flashback later, when they found her, before they go in the room where they find her, like, do you hear the Sex and the City theme? Yeah, I think so. And then they go in, and like the robot's sitting there watching Sex and the City. It's really weird.
I dodged a bullet on this one, didn't I?
It's not good, Matt.
Yeah, the whole, it's like a really, it's not, I feel really cruel calling it like a weird fan fiction thing, but it's so based on referencing other material, it feels really kind of amateur in what it's doing. Like it's, instead of just relying on its own story, it's, I don't know. I got very little out of this, and you know, a lot they go to like a nightclub that's been developed in Gotham that's run by Sam Bradley, and it's a nightclub where both heroes and villains go because it's basically shit for everyone in Future State, so they all just unwind and go to the same nightclub together. Even that concept feels like this is just weird fan fiction. This is like something that belongs on Tumblr. This is not a comic book. Like, so,
which tells me Pete has spent time on Tumblr, if he knows what belongs there or not.
How dare you? Maybe I've just heard evidence of these Tumblr ongoings.
I'm not gonna judge if that's what you're into. Cool, just you know, stuff starts to make sense now.
I really dislike this line of thinking that Matt has brought to the table. So
logically, it makes sense, and he's having a hard time undoing that logic.
Yeah.
So
at the end of the issue, who is it that bursts out? Is it the magistrate police force or whatever? But they bust in and shoot Catwoman. She's lying on the dance floor bleeding out.
Oh, great.
And that's a cliffhanger. Oh, Sam Bradley gets shot multiple times in the back, so he's probably dead.
And he's just a human. So, like, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it's just Catwoman, to be fair.
Yeah, but Catwoman's got, you know.
But she only takes one bullet, whereas Slam takes at least two.
Yes. At least two, maybe three. There's three blams.
Blam, blam, blam.
Well, yeah, that's three gunshots, though. Not necessarily three hits. True. But it could be. It's hard to tell, honestly.
Either way. I'm glad I skipped this.
Yep.
Yeah, I do not recommend this Siren story. And I'm not like a big like Gotham City Sirens like person anyway.
Well, let's be honest, I was the one probably most likely to enjoy this.
Well, I saw Lou Pacino's name attached, and that's why I was like, and then I was just running out of time. I'm like, I'm just gonna skip it, and now it seems like, you know,
I wish I did. If all the things I wish I'd said, you know what, I'll just stop here and not read this last backup. This is the one I wish I stopped and didn't read.
Yeah.
That said, at least that being so bad in that unique way give me something to talk about.
I was trying to see, because you know, this writer, I was like, maybe they are a you know, like a fan fiction writer. Yeah, because there are lots of people who would do that and get published, right? So yeah, I googled it, found a Twitter, and it's like, okay, TV writer, contributor / former editor of Mads magazine, and no real talk about comics. You know, recent comic stuff is just, you know, retweeting about this issue. So I stuck her in IMDb. She has one credit as a TV writer, and it is for an episode of Stargirl, Shiv Part 2, which I don't remember being a bad episode.
No, it was a fine episode. But I mean, TV's written in teams. It's a bit more.
It is, but it was notable that, okay, that's her credit there. I'm like, okay, so it's not like she's a bad writer entirely. But this story was nice.
Maybe just feeling out the comic book format.
Yeah, like technically I finished it, but I don't feel like I did, because I got to the end, but there was at least like 3 or 4, 5, 6 pages maybe where I wasn't really reading it. I was just kind of not taking it in. I was just kind of staring at the page for 15, 20 seconds and then going to the next one. And I just kind of I noticed I was doing that after a while. I was like, well, there's only like 3 pages left. Might as well finish it.
Yeah, I cannot recommend. And yeah, the art's kind of, like, it's not bad art. It's just, it's not. I mean, it's not up to the Al Pacino standard.
As I thumb through the pages, the art looks nice. You know, I don't know if it goes storytellingly wise. I didn't have any context. You know, but just from looking at it, it doesn't look, you know, it's not egregious.
No, it's not.
No, it's never bad. It's lacking the flair and flourish that Lupacino's work usually has.
Honestly, I think I'm so hesitant talking about the art in a weird way, because I hate the design of these versions of the characters so much that I think I'm letting that color the actual quality of the art, because I'm looking at because Catwoman's got these, like, you know, these shades on. She's wearing this stupid weird top that's got a midriff, and Poison Ivy's got like a tank top on, like a mesh tank top. I don't know. The whole thing's
Yeah, the Poison Ivy design, I was kind of like that weird flex, but okay.
That one's all weird because the top, it is, I think that is the recent outfit that she got given in her own book based off of the way the collar is.
Yeah, but it's missing.
But it's just it's just cut off as it's just turned into a crop top basically.
But I don't know. It feels kind of Hot Topic designs of the sirens or something.
Yeah,
that's what I'm getting from it. All right, I'm going to stop shitting on this now. We've got more books to talk about. You didn't read it, Matt. Connor, do you want to give it a...
I give it a 3.
Yeah, I'll give it a 4 because the art's solid enough. But yeah, the constant referencing of stuff, and I don't know, it really felt fan fiction the way it was like, oh, that's just all these weird concepts that I feel like I'd read about on Twitter rather than actually wanting to see them done as a serious attempt in a comic book. With very little to justify them. So rating the book as a whole though, and I think Mac can still do that even though he's only rating for 2 stories.
Yeah, and this is I just averaged mine out based off my scores.
Sure. And
I can't give this book a 4, which is what it would necessitate, because I did like the first story so much, and the second story, the art is fine. So I'm just gonna give overall, I'm gonna give the book a 6.5, and that's the next Batman's doing a lot of the heavy lifting there.
Yeah, you can have one be more weighted if you liked it enough. Because I think if you like something a lot, it outweighs how much you dislike something else.
Wait till we get to Superman Worlds at War, because that'll factor significantly in.
Okay, yes, we'll talk about that. Connor?
I'm gonna give it a 6, I think, because I like the first story quite a lot. The other two, I think I give the first one an 8.5, and the other two are 3, both 3s. I've no idea what that averages out to, but the first story is, quote unquote, the main story. It's the one the issue is named after. It's what the appeal, the main draw is. So I'm giving it extra weighting for that as well. So yeah, I'll give it the 6.
Yeah, I'll give it the 6 as well. Again, first story's really, really good. And then, yeah, everything we just said about the other two.